and welcome to the Sanctuary, a safe space to speak from the heart. I'm your host, Israel. My guest today is the owner of Hookline Tinker, Laurie Dolhan. Thanks for coming to the Sanctuary today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
Okay, first off, I know you're really busy because, like, while we're talking, you said you were actually working on new designs, new patterns, right?
New patterns all the time. So I'm always working on something new, and I have two that are being released, well, within days. So I'm really excited about that. I just started putting teasers out about what they look
Wow.
like. So,
So,
yeah.
how does it like? Where do you get the idea for the inspiration for the designs from?
Well, it's a bit like a funnel. So there's like the millions of ideas that I have all the time, and so sometimes I'll write them down. Other times it doesn't happen. Sometimes people suggest them, but then it like trickles down into this funnel until I finally land on a few, and then I come up with lots of designs that never actually make the cut. So I'm pretty much designing all the time, but my
Hmm.
ideas are usually based in nature. So I like, things relating to woodland and woodland creatures or nautical themes. Generally, just things that I find interesting. I'm not really too narrow in focus. I like, yeah. I create patterns that I like.
Mm, mm. So let's rewind it. How did you get into embroidery?
Well, I've made lots. I mean, I've crocheted, I've painted, I've done lots of different types of crafts, but embroidery was the one that I finally landed on because it didn't take up a lot of space. It was really flexible and creative. I could have a lot of creative control over it.
Hmm.
And I found that I really liked that movement of like the needle going in and out of the fabric. I found that very relaxing. So once I started doing that,
Hmm.
I fell in love with it. And it didn't happen like the very first time I stitched, because the first time I stitched, I was, I think I was in grade 6, and I was in home economics, and I had a very enthusiastic teacher try to teach me. And at the time, I thought, I am never in a million years going to use this. This is a complete waste of my time. And now here I am owing, big apologies, back to those early lessons, because it really did provide that foundation for everything that I'm doing now.
Mm. And okay, so home economics, and you're like, I'll never do it. When you did all these things, painting and stuff, you landed on embroidery and found out like it was just the right fit. When did you go from something you like to do to a business?
It was almost right away. Like it was
Oh.
almost instantaneous. So when I first started stitching, I was stitching actually on fabric that was already like patterned fabric. And I found these little, this little nesting dolls. And I thought, oh, okay, well, I'll decorate them with little kind of fancy stitches. And then I'll make
Mm,
them, I'll kind of stuff them and make them into ornaments. And
mm,
that was the jumping off point, because I started to look for patterns and I couldn't really find anything that fit my aesthetic, because
mm,
I don't really like things that are very cute. I like things that tend to be just a little bit more modern. And when I couldn't find what I wanted, I was like, well, I guess I'll just start designing my own patterns. And so that's what I did. And as soon as I started doing that, I knew right away that I was going to start selling patterns. So
oh.
it was one of those things that wasn't like a big, oh, I'm doing this for a really long time. The hard part was just kind of figuring out how to actually do it.
And
Because
how
of
did you
course
actually do it?
it took forever. Like when I first started, it was brutal, because I thought, how am I going to transfer the pattern onto the fabric? It
Mm,
was not an easy kind of quick fix. Even when I was first doing it myself, I had made like my own little light box using like a bulb in a box with a piece of glass on top, and I was tracing, and I was like, well, I am certainly not going to be doing this all day.
yeah.
And I didn't have the patience to wait to like ship patterns out and like wait for them to come back on
Mm-hmm.
pre-printed fabric. So that part actually took me a good 6 to 7 months to figure out. And people
And
ask me about it all the time, and I think, oh, maybe I'll share it. And then, I don't know. I'm like waiting for that moment of like, sharing it with the world, because I do it in my own studio. So that could be coming out. But people often are like, well, I'm thinking about doing this. Please tell me all your secrets. And I'm always like, oh, please put in a little bit of work. Just a little bit. I want to help. I really do. So it's one of those things I've really struggled with. But yeah, we print everything in studio. And that was the hardest part. That's the hard part. And then taking something and saying, okay, well, I'm going to make it simple enough that I can communicate it to someone else that they can replicate it. Because that's the other piece. It's like you can make something, but how can you help someone else be able to actually duplicate it?
yeah, that is a skill I don't have. I'm that person that will be like, oh, do like this, and then I'll step in and start doing it. So that's one skill I don't have at all. But how did you figure that out?
It's funny because when I moved here to Nova Scotia back in 2011, but before that, I lived in the Yukon and I worked for
that's the super cool part of Canada.
Oh, it was amazing. That was where I very first fell in love with Canada, because when I first, oops, sorry about that. When I very first, I'm originally from New Jersey, so when I very first came to Canada, I spent the summer in the Yukon, and I fell in love with it.
Is there summer there though? Like, does it ever get warm there?
It is warm. In fact, there was one summer that was like the hottest in North America. Like it was insanely hot, and there were lots of fires. It was really smoky, and people went like crazy because it was so hot. It was really weird. Okay. But so summers are warm and it's daylight the whole time, which takes something of getting used to. But then winters are the opposite, because then it's like it's minus 50 and it's dark and it's really cold. But it's really unique. It's a very culturally diverse region, which is kind of a surprise to most people, but I find that it's very culturally diverse, and way more so than Nova Scotia, I feel. It's just like this tiny little microcosm with bursts of these like amazing people doing really innovative and creative things. But it was that last winter, I was like, I'm super done. I really need some sunshine. The vitamin D was not cutting it. But when I worked in the Yukon, my last actual job that I held there, I had a brief but glorious career in government where I worked for family law programming. And I designed how to get your own divorce, how to apply for child support orders and varying orders and all of those sorts of things. So I had to take, something that was a very complex process and then drill it down in a way that was, easy to follow from anyone, that someone could pick it up and follow it. So I use that same type of mindset, when someone is looking something and they haven't done it before, what do I need to say to help them kind of understand what they need to do? So that, I think, is actually the strongest skill set I brought into designing the kits was, can someone else replicate this? How can I make things simple? So.
Yeah, because, if I buy the thing and I can't make it, or make it at least full or have a set of instructions that are easy enough to follow, and then when I follow the instructions I get this awesome finished product, hook, line and sinker might not be what it is today. So you're originally from New Jersey in the United States, and you'd think you'd move to this side of Canada, but you moved to the other side of Canada all the way to Yukon. Was it for the job?
No, it was for the first time was for a man, and then the second time was for a man. So I went there for the first
Laurie.
time, long time ago. Some guy's like, "Hey, you want to go to the Yukon with me?" And I'm like, "Sure, let's go." So at that point, I was young, and I had just decided I was going to go on this big trip, and I went for the first time, and then. it just kind of, it really kind of gets in your bones. So I left and came back multiple times, and then
Oh wow.
I was back in New Jersey, and I had a friend that said, "Oh, I just hung up the phone with Trevor. You should give him a call." And next thing you know, I'm in a long distance relationship with someone that I had met, like I've been friends with in the Yukon. And then 2 years later, I'm a 90-day fiance moving back and getting married. True story.
If you were on that TV show, what would your episode have been like?
My episode would have been like, did not bring enough warm pants. Laurie's freezing. Like, she is so cold. Did not pack enough warm pants. Yeah, I moved, when I moved up there, I was actually supposed to be crossing the border on September 11th.
That year, like
That was the year. It was 2001. I was supposed to be crossing the border and ended up delaying my trip by 3 weeks. Otherwise, I would have been stranded there at the border. But that was the time. My application was so far along that it was easier for me to get in. But
wait, you were like New Jersey is just around the corner from like where it happened. Like, how was that experience for you?
I still, like, I remember it vividly. Like, I remember the moment where somebody's like, oh, a plane hit the towers. And I remember thinking, oh, that's such a random thing. And then they said 2 planes hit. And I was like, wow, that's doubly random. And they're like, don't you think it's a little too random? And then, because you don't want to, think about, like, what's happening. But they often don't portray, and they didn't portray, what we saw, like driving down the road and seeing gas stations vandalized. And, there was just a lot of fear around that time that followed the event. They closed bridges. They were like, oh, there were explosions here and there. And none of it was actually, true. It wasn't really happening. But, people were really scared. And when and it was right around the time that I was immigrating. So I really was kind of thinking about, it was very kind of like front of mind, this whole idea of what does it actually mean to be, at the time, does it mean to be American? Like I wrote an article and it was published, this whole idea of, if you say that we're a country for all peoples, then there are people that are out there that are obviously set to do harm, but you can't just discriminate against an entire population, an entire color or shade of people based upon, because there was no, it didn't really matter where you were from. It was based on color. And so it was a very challenging time. And at the time I was like, should I be leaving? What does this look like? And then I was up in the Yukon where it felt so far away from it that it was, it was like going to a different planet altogether. So that whole, like, in coming back to it, I mean, obviously people really did come together at that time after the fact, but it wasn't all people. So that's one of the things that I really take away from the experience, is that, there's what's shown to the world, and then there's what was happening behind the scenes. Because, back in the day, we didn't have those iPhones capturing pictures of things. So there was a lot happening that, we still don't really talk about behind the scenes. So that wasn't particularly awesome.
Yeah, no, thanks for sharing that, Laurie. So you go to Yukon, get married. Did you do the hook, line, and sinker? Like, did it start in Yukon, or was it, like, not the business itself, but just, embroidering for yourself? Did it start in Yukon, or only when you moved to Nova Scotia?
It was when I was here. I mean, I was here in Nova Scotia. I mean, the very first year that I moved to the Yukon, I crocheted 10 blankets. They were all 7 by 7.
Yeah.
So
It's super cool.
I was just constantly, but I was like, I should make a house cozy. But I'm a very high anxiety person, so I have lots of anxiety. So I find crafting really helps me stay calm. Most of the crafts that I had actually done ended up being very expensive. Like, you take lots of lessons, you have to, like, invest in all kinds of materials. And that was when when I started embroidering, it was really only, I think, back in 2016. So it hasn't been really that long. I kind of played around with it for a year and a bit, and then I launched Hook, Line, and Tinker. So there wasn't like a huge amount of time, because I actually find that the learning curve when it comes to embroidery is really short, which is one of the best
Oh.
things about it. Like, you don't have to be fancy. You don't have to
Well,
be fancy.
especially on your Instagram, they look amazing. And if I'm making something like that, I want it to look, as close to what I'm looking at, right?
You know, it's interesting because so many people are like, I want it to look exactly like that. And then there's other people that look at the pattern and they just like, we're going to add lots of color. We're going to change up the stitches. I'm like adding paint. Like, people do all kinds of things. And that's the thing. It's like,
Yeah.
it can be exactly the same, or, you can be really creative. I find that even when I look at my own work, depending upon how I'm feeling that, like in that moment, you find that if you're super anxious, everything gets kind of like tighter and bunchier. And if you're relaxed, super relaxed, things get really loose. It really depends on, it's never going to be exactly the same. Even when I stitch things multiple times, they're always a little bit different, which is why it's always a bummer when I lose my samples, because then I'm like, oh, my print stuff
Yeah,
doesn't.
yeah, yeah. Okay. Yeah, you jumped right into it right away. Were you like, did you have like a storefront, or was it online? How did that
I
happen?
I just posted on Etsy. So I was like, okay, it's like super low risk. I had been listening to this podcast called Side Hustle School. And it was like, you don't need to make like a big investment. You don't need to do a lot. Just like try things. And I had already had businesses that failed. So I was like, hey, what's the worst that could happen, right? So I
What
spent like
What are some
100.
of the previous businesses you had?
I started a business where I was like, oh, let me connect freelancers with opportunities, and threw like a ton of money into it, and it totally failed. And
Wait,
then
that's actually not a bad idea though.
theoretically,
Okay,
the
so what
execution
was
was
difficult
like,
about it? Like, did you like build something or?
well, you build a website, but I'm like not a super technical person. So for me, it was like, oh, I had the concept, and can I put people together and make it happen? But it takes a
Oh.
lot to actually, gain that buy-in. And I really wanted to like increase transparency when it came to like hiring through government and, those sorts of opportunities. And needless to say, it was a big flop. So, I was like, okay, let's just see, what it's like to, I partnered up in another business, and then that business didn't work. And then I was like, okay, I'm going to get a traditional job, and that is going to free me up to be calmer, to like have better quality family life, stability, income stability. And at that point, I was like, I am just not going to be self-employed again. So
Oh.
that's what I thought in that moment. It was like, I am going to like settle in. And I realized not,
How did you feel to get to that point where, okay, I'm just gonna go do the 9 to 5 thing?
it was a really hard transition at first. And then I thought it was a really fantastic company that I could, they were B Corp certified, so like really ethical, and I could feel good, like kind of committing my energies into a company that created good in the world. So
Mm-hmm.
that was the best fit that I could find. But I come from a family of entrepreneurs. Like, my father was an entrepreneur. My grandfather on my mother's side, I've got all these relatives, like my godparents were entrepreneurs. And so, it's kind of, I grew up in the family business, and this was a piece of me that I realized that I had to acknowledge. And I thought, okay, I'll just do a little something so that I feel like I have some, some project where I feel I have creative control. And that was when I started Hook, Line, and Tinker. So the creative aspect gave me an opportunity to feel like, okay, I'm making something, I'm engaging with people, and it made me feel more creative overall. But then once it really started to take off, all of those skills that I had kind of built over time of growing up in a family business, I thought, well, my son needed to be homeschooled for a year. So I was like, okay, we're going to do this. We're going to we're gonna go for it. And, you know, I replaced my income almost immediately once I started working, you know, from home and, you know, homeschooling. And then the following year, you know, he went back to school. And then I just, you know, I've just been going for it. I was like, okay, I'm in this. I love it. It's paying the bills. And now I've been able to hire staff. And so it's, yeah, I never want it to stop. I want it to
Yeah.
keep going.
Yeah. No, no, that's a great feeling, you know, to go from, man, that's like, okay, so there's a trick that filmmakers or writers do, and you take your, you know, your protagonist, and then you make the worst possible thing to happen to him or her, and then when they are right down at that thing, like, you know, something, and if you're really good at it, you're going to make this person actually do it themselves, right? You know, like some not so good films have some god stretch their hand and
Yeah.
help the person, but if you really want to do it really good, you make this person find a way and then get back up, and everyone's and that
They
is
have to
what you
suffer.
did.
They have
Yeah.
to suffer a little bit. You know, they have to be in the pit
Right,
before
because
they
you tried all
pull
this.
themselves up.
Yeah, yeah. Like, you know, it's like I'm watching this Hook, Line, and Sinker film. Like, the film is called Hook, Line, and Sinker. And it's this lady, and then she moved to this super cool part of Canada. And then she moved here, and then she did all these businesses and all this. And then she found that thing, and it's this thing that she loves. And this thing just, like, you know, led to all this. Anyway, it's a great story. I love it. I love it. I love it. So you did Etsy. And then where did the growth lead to from Etsy?
So when I posted on Etsy, I sold immediately. Like, they sold so fast that I was
How
like,
did that feel?
I
How did
didn't
that
even
feel?
realize they had sold. I was like, this is great. But now I'm terrified because now I have to take what I've made and send it to someone and just really hope that they love it. Like, really hope. So my very first sale went to Ireland. And it was, you know, nautical themed. So I totally get that, because that's what all the original patterns were. They were all nautical. And then the next one went to Nebraska. And I was like, whew, this is a thing. Like, Nebraska? This is weird, you know?
Yeah.
Nautic, if you want some sea themed stuff. And I mean, I can't blame you. I mean, I love the ocean, right? So I sent the stuff to Nebraska, and then I spent some money. So I'm like, okay, I made a little bit of money. Now I'm going to spend some money. So then I started to, like, kind of upgrade things a little bit. And then I signed up, and it was right, you know, around the leading up to Christmas season. So I was like, oh, you know, I'll sell at a few craft shows. And they were doing well. And I was like, oh, this is really cool. And then in January, I got my first wholesale request.
Oh,
and
nice.
I was like, oh, now this is interesting. Like, I don't know what this looks like. I'm, like, still feeling like a complete baby business. And then 2 days later, I got another one. And I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
So going back and rethinking everything, it was really, you know, and as a business owner, sometimes it's hard because people give you ideas all the time. And it's hard to know which ones to say. I'm going to say no to this one, but I'm going to take this one, you know. And when those wholesale opportunities come in, you have to, like, rethink your whole pricing strategy and, you know, rethink your marketing and your packaging and all of that sort of stuff. But once I actually, you know, kind of went in that direction, I still almost, like, you know, 80% of my sales are actually wholesale sales. So I sell lots to independent shops, and it's been a ride. Like, this last year has been, I mean, independent stores have really had it, they've been through it this year. So, you know, being able to, you know, provide a product, and for me to be able to, like, you know, help meet the need that was growing where people were staying home and trying to make things. And but, like, they're the ones that I love, those independent shops. I shop independent as often as I can. But they are just, like, the whole backbone of our economy. Like, they're the ones that, you know, they hire people and pay fair wages. They're looking after the environment. They support independent makers. And anything I can do to, you know, try and, you know, support them is like, that's really what my focus has been in the last year. I even shut down my own website for a period of time to say, don't buy from me. Here's a list of stockists. Go buy from them.
Mm, mm, mm. Yeah, that's a great part to actually talk about this because something that comes out in your captions on your website, pretty much, everything that has to do with you and Hook, Line, and Tinker is like, you're all about the environment and all about giving back to the community. And like, was that something that was installed in you growing up, or when did that become a part of you and what you do?
So yeah, that's really it's interesting because I've been volunteering basically since I was old enough to volunteer. So I always had this kind of part of me that cared about what kind of impact when I was really young, I thought I was going to grow up and become a nun. Like all the way up until puberty hit, I thought that's what I was going to do. I saw The Trouble with Angels with like Sally Field and everything like on Saturday afternoon at one point, and I'm like, I'm going to grow up and be a nun. And that didn't happen. But I was like, I really
Yeah.
like giving back
Yeah.
and being involved in community and being
Mm,
just kind of being the best that I could be.
mm-hmm.
That was always there. The business side, like, I mean, I'm 37. So, like, back in the day, business was all about the money. So I grew up in a business atmosphere that was very much about making dollars. So it wasn't necessarily about caring for employees or environment or giving back to community. So it's almost like there were these two separate pieces of me.
Mm,
And when I moved to the Yukon, I realized that I could actually work in nonprofits and earn a living, which that was a big transition point for me. So I did
mm-hmm.
that a fair bit, and then worked in government. But when I moved to Nova Scotia, I was like, well, I still have these two pieces of me, and then I discovered ethical business and corporate social responsibility. So that's where like all these pieces started to actually come together. This idea that
Mm,
I could actually run a business. It's not necessarily a social enterprise, so to speak,
mm-hmm.
but it's as good as I can make it. So if I believe that if every business did its part to to look after the environment and give back to community, we would have a completely different world. Like it would just be very different.
Mm,
I don't necessarily think it's capitalism, but this idea of, you know, like selfishness, I guess, in a way, of hoarding, commodities, of hoarding money, and of not being respectful of,
mm-hmm.
your employees and what your impact is. And so, that's one of the reasons why I really want to be B Corp certified this year, because it's like, you go through the B Corp certification process, which is, the international standard for ethical business. They look at, your corporate structure, your treatment of employees, your impact on the environment,
Mm-hmm.
what is your involvement with community, and you put all of those pieces together. And then I'm like, okay, well, now I can feel a heck of a lot better about what it is that I'm doing compared to like, my measurement isn't how much I give. That's where I determine what the success is, as opposed to
Mm-hmm.
like, how much
Mm-hmm.
money do I have in the bank. So when you see things, you kind of flip, your priorities around. It's a
Mm.
lot easier for me to, to work really hard and long days and then come home and hit that pillow hard, because when I wake up, I know that what I'm doing is actually making an impact.
Yeah, yeah, it's great you do that, and like you stand as this shining example because there are people that have actually I'll just say it. So last year COVID happened, and everyone's staying at home, and then we collectively, as pretty much humankind, watched someone get killed right in front of us, and then everyone just went nuts. Black Lives Matter. My company supports this. But then, if you just sit down and just analyze things that most of these companies said, it's like they're saying one thing and then their actions are like not matching what they're saying. And it's so refreshing to seeing someone that's like saying something and what they're doing actually matches what they're saying. So first off, I respect you're doing that, and I'm really, really grateful that you're doing that. And so in a way, you're kind of doing what nuns do.
Well, if you think about it, like, I think people are like, maybe some of these businesses are afraid that, if you take a position, then you're going to alienate, a certain percentage of your customers. And like, I get the fear, because like sometimes I still have the fear too. But in the end, it's like, you know what? If I'm my authentic self, then there are people out there that are going to connect with that, and then there are people that aren't. There are going to people that are going to, completely run away. And I've had that too. Sometimes people have more time to kind of spew hate than they do any love. And, and I feel bad for them, because I'm like, you're obviously not in a very good place.
Yeah.
So, being able to kind of be a values-based business it's a lot of work, and then it's not, because it's like, it's easy. I think it's easier to actually care than to not care. But that's just me. I mean, I feel like when we, if you have any kind of a bone of empathy in your body, you have to actually feel that, feel for other people. And when we shut that down, I think that's more hurtful.
Yeah, it is. Whew. Anyway, again, no, no, really. Thank you for doing important work you're doing. So let's get back to, we're still on Hook, Line, and Tinker, and this journey you've come on. You did the wholesales. Did you ever have like classes, workshops?
I've done them, and I've done, the thing with the workshops is, and I will be doing them again, but there's so much work because you spend all your time really just filling the seats. So like doing that piece of it, I feel like it takes a lot of energy. So, and I like teaching. So hopefully I'll be doing that again in the future. But, most of the workshops that I've done are actually directly working with, women experiencing homelessness. So I've, a lot of my workshopping has been on a volunteer basis. So I've gone in and, one of the very first workshops that I taught, I was in, one of the shelters, and I was like, okay, well, just, stitch a word, just like draw the word on the fabric, and then stitch something that speaks to you, that feels important to you. And one of the participants had stitched, written and stitched the word welcome. And so, I'm sorry, I'm just a little emotional about it. But
Okay.
She said that when she has a home, she's going to hang it up, and that was really hard, and especially since, in the moment I have to, hold it together and not be emotional about it, because I can't let her see me, kind of go through that, because I'm there to be supportive and be respectful of where she's at. But, the honesty and, that movement, that's, really where I've enjoyed spending my time is, in a place with, with people, generally, leading workshops where, everybody should have access to a creative outlet no matter what. And that's one of the reasons why, embroidery is really one of the things that I focus on, because it's easy for people of any income level to be able to get supplies, inexpensively. It doesn't take much money. And it provides a certain level of, of peace. But, that's generally where the new space will have a workshop space in it. I'm hoping to like be.
New space.
Oh yeah.
Let's talk about new space.
The new space. So we moved out of my basement where I've been living for 3 years, turning into a mushroom in the dark. It's been like, it was getting a little too cozy. It's been, it was a big transition, and it happened very quickly. Basically, I had been kind of thinking, what is this going to look like? What is the next level? Like, we can't stay in this basement forever. I
Mm-hmm.
need more natural light. Like I moved from the Yukon because I wanted light, and now I'm working out of my basement. So I was like, please let me have sunshine and fresh air. So like spontaneously found a place up the road that was like 12 minutes from the house, and then I was like, that's it. We walked in and I said, I'm good. We're going to take it. And he's like, are you sure you don't want to go home and think about it? And I'm like, no, I'm decided. And he's like, well, I'm not going to do anything until you come back tomorrow. And I'm like, oh no, I'm in. So we have this new space, and it's big and like echoey because there's like nothing in there. But once we actually get everything, right now we're just settling in, but we'll offer workshops and we'll have a little storefront and things, and that'll be coming this summer. So I'm really excited about it, and I'm about inviting other makers to come in and teach as well. So that's something that I'm pretty, it's great to be able to see people get excited about making and being able to witness that firsthand. So that's something I always enjoy.
Yeah, no, that is awesome. That is awesome. So, between now and when you open in the summer, what are some things left to do in the space?
Oh my gosh. Well, right now it's pretty. There's shelving. Right now there's like stacks of boxes and things still on the floor. So there's lots of paint to be happening, and I want to paint a mural. So I'm like excited
Oh,
that I get to actually do some paint stuff too.
wait, you will paint the mural yourself? Is
I'm going
this the
to.
plan?
Yeah. I'm
Oh
excited.
my
Yeah.
gosh. Okay.
Yeah. Sometimes I find it like, because I'm stitching all the time, changing
Mm-hmm.
it up and doing something else actually helps you be more creative. So, or at least it works for me. So I find I still like to do different things just to shake things up. Otherwise, you get static. And
Mm-hmm.
when you get static, no magic. The magic just like
Mm.
dies. So I'm still trying to, you know, find new ways to kind of express myself.
Yeah, no, that's great. Okay. Do you already have an idea of what the mural will be, or?
No, it's
I had a
there.
feeling that, one thing, and I might be wrong about this, but a trend I'm noticing in your life is this: let's do it, let's do it.
Yeah. I never know what it's going to look like. Sometimes people are always like, "Well, what's the new collection?" And I'm like, "I don't know. It's something like this." And they're like, "What's it going to look like?" And I'm like, "I don't know until it's done." And then all of a sudden, it's like, there it is, because the process is it's like an evolution. So you start one thing, and because all of my stuff is designed to be able to work with each other. So it's like, I have 3 patterns that are all blue, 3 patterns that are all red, so that you can put them together. But then, like the woodland collection, I keep all the colors the same and harmonize, so that if you do one, it'll still hang with everything else and tell a story. Like, so I set certain limitations, like in everything that I'm producing,
Mm-hmm.
by color, by like certain, then there are limitations relating to the type of stitches that I use, and how can you actually create texture using stitches. So there are lots of these limitations that actually enable greater creativity. But when I get experimental, which I often do, sometimes you don't know what it's going to look like, and then all of a sudden I'm like, I mean, I'm surprised. It's like, oh my gosh, look at that! Oh, that works. That's good. I like that.
Okay, okay, okay. Like, how do you now know that you're at that place, right, when it's like, okay, it's done now?
Um, yeah, like generally, I'll end up taking a few things away. But there's that moment. There's that moment where I look and I'm like, okay, that's done. And I try not to be. It's so hard to not like perfection. I don't know. I'm going to make up a word. Perfectionize yourself to the point where you're like, you continue working on something and then it never actually happens. It's really
Mm,
a hard line between those ones, that I work on where I'm like, oh, it's almost there,
mm,
or I feel like it's done. So
mm,
there are the number of patterns that I have created that have never seen the light of day is extensive, and I feel like it should be that way because it's,
You should make a collection of those things that don't see the light of day and call them the light of day.
yeah, well, I actually went ahead and for the very first time I took a bunch of the hoops and I kind of like threw them out and I'm like, okay, these are all the ones that never made it. These are the ones where like the color was wrong, the style was wrong, something was wrong with it. And then of course everybody's like, we want that one. Like the one that was in there. And I was like, really? That's the one? Because the reason why that one didn't launch is because it was too hard for anyone else to replicate it. So that I had to go back and revisit it, and that is one of the ones that's launching right now. I finally did it, and I consider it done. But it's always a challenge, when you're creating something, knowing when it's actually done. And it's funny because like the most popular patterns that I've ever made were the ones that I made last holiday season. And I'm not a typical like red and green Christmas traditional kind of person. So I made these blue, very kind of like abstract animals. And the first one was a horse, and it was like based on the Swedish, like the Drala horse, right? But it's a little bit different. And so I made that one, and then the dove came really easy. And then I was like, oh, the first one is really hard. The second one's a little easy. And then within hours I had a reindeer. It was super fast. I don't know what happened, but it just came together very, very quickly. Top seller, the reindeer.
Wow.
So it's like you never know, as much as even I think there's certain ones that I love and they're going to be like the top and the number one, you never know until the audience sees it what they really think. And they were so different. I didn't think anybody would like them, but people loved them, and I'm like super grateful.
Yeah. No, man, Laurie, you're so easy to talk to. I'm having so much fun, and I don't want to let you go. But
I can't believe we're being humans talking to each other. This is amazing.
Okay, I want to let you. I'm going to let you go on this question. So now you've taken this thing you love and you've built it into this business. Someone is out there watching, listening, and they've are passionate about something, and they're thinking, okay, maybe there might be something here, and they want to start a business like you did with Hook, Line, and Tinker. What things would you like to share with them?
So, as someone who's 47, when I was younger, did I say I was 37 earlier? I may have done that. That's what happens when you're 47. But back when I was younger and I was in school, there were no opportunities for, at least I didn't feel like there was an opportunity to study art and have a career other than graphic design or like fine art. But now, there are so many tools that are out there to help you connect with an audience. So if you create something that's of good quality, that's authentic, and that really adds value to someone, like something where it's going to make someone feel good or give them a sense of creativity or beautify their home, you can use tools like Etsy and Squarespace to build, or Shopify to build a website, and use social media. There are lots of ways to go out there and connect with people who are really caring about independent makers. That's been one of the best things that I've seen, is this trend where people are actually looking to connect through story and through values with people that are all over the world, just out there creating all kinds of things. And I hope that trend continues, because I think that it helps us be more connected with, for me, I look around my home and I can appreciate the things that are made by other makers, especially those makers where I know their stories. Like this, this was handmade. You look at, I can wear things where I know where they come from. I can decorate my home with them. There's things that I have that are like useful, like candles and soaps and all of those things. And I would say that there's a place for everybody. Like if you make something you know, go ahead and test it out, see what other your friends and family think about it, you know, put it out there into the world, and just go for it. Like, no fear.
Wow. Wow. Yeah, one thing you should also do, you should have like this series of talks, like, like every Friday morning, you talk about, I don't know, just 5 minutes, because that was really like, I can hear like music playing in the background, and it's like, this is what you have to do, and blah blah blah. It's like, let's go and make it happen. Thank you
So
so
you
much,
brought
Laurie.
this introvert. You brought this introvert out. So this does not happen very often. So this is a special event. We should mark this on the calendar so I can celebrate it next year, because this is more talking than I have done in a long time.
Oh my gosh, Laurie, thank you so much. Thank you so much for what you're doing with Hook Like and Tinker. And I actually wanted to talk about your Instagram, but I'll actually invite you back to just talk about your Instagram, because holy smokes, it looks lovely, but I think to me it's more about the engagement and the look, and your engagement is nuts.
It's been amazing. And I'm like I said, I mean, I'm really, really grateful, because all I can do is be myself, and the fact that there are people that are out there, that can kind of, I guess, feel my vibe. I guess, like, this is who I am. This is what I'm creating, and it's really nice to feel connected beyond my little studio here. So it's lovely. And then to get, obviously I put my social media out there, and you come out and you're like, hey, you want to have a chat. So obviously something's working. So yeah, it's pretty amazing.
It's working great. Thank you, Laurie, and I can't wait to have you back.
Thank you so much, and I can't wait to tell you what we're going to do with our new space. So